It has not been the best of weeks for Iowa athletics. Of course, an ouster early, second round of the NCAA men's basketball tournament. We will talk football and some reports coming in that aren't of the most positive note either. But we will hopefully otherwise lift your spirits for the next 45 minutes or so right here at the Hawkeyes live show that we present each and every Tuesday at 4:30 Central Time right here at the Voice of College Football. And the guy that makes it all happen, of course, is Corey Bratta from the Hawkeye of the Storm. Corey, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good. You're right about being a real rough week to be a Hawkeye. And now I'm fighting off the Fire Fran people. You know, Mark, I am not afraid to be critical. Can we agree with that? I'm not afraid to speak my mind on things.
There is no question about that.
But I am not for firing Fran McCaffrey. I know this is a football show, but yeah, I know. And I saw your tweet. He has not been to a single Sweet 16 in 12 years. But Mark, you know the history of Iowa basketball, and no, it's not. I had the real Hayden, who's one of our regular contributors. He and I got into a long thing on Twitter because his perspective is you don't make hirings and firings based upon fear, and that's not what I'm doing. But the reality is that you have a situation where Tom Davis was winning basically at the same rate that Fran McCaffrey is winning. Okay. Similar success in the NCAA tournament. I know he went to the Sweet 16 in 99. They get rid of him in 99, right? And I see the real Hayden's here, so I'm going to give him a shout out real quick. They get rid of him in 99, Mark. What do? They hire Steve Alford, right? He ends up leaving, but never really had much of any real sustained success, especially in the tournament. Then they get rid of him, and it's Todd Licklider, who was a disaster here. And now it's Fran McCaffrey. And how many years? That's like the last 30-some, 40 years. I'm just saying the guy just won a Big Ten tournament. And I tweeted out today, it's all about perspective on these things. And that's why I have people who criticize me for being critical of Kirk and for being critical of Brian. Well, what do you know, they're winning 10 games. So if that's what you're happy with, you have a right to be happy with that. I'm not going to tell the real Hayden or anybody else how to feel about Fran McCaffrey. My opinion is that I think Fran took a positive step in the right direction this year. Hopefully he's taking action every day, but this year he really did with that championship in the Big Ten tournament. But some people say it doesn't mean anything. I am not going to sit here and say that I think Iowa football took a real step in the right direction as it relates to winning the West, because they've done that before. And the result in the Big Ten championship game was pretty deciding. And yes, Iowa lost to Richmond in the NCAA tournament. The tournament's weird. As you know, Mark, anybody can beat anybody. Richmond went out and got beat by like 25 to Providence 2 days later. So anyways, it is what it is. I enjoy having these conversations, and that's why I bring them up. I see Cole. No, Cole, I don't care I don't care too much about how people think of me. I'm just explaining. I understand people's perspectives. I want to acknowledge that. I try not to ignore people unless people are just absolutely ridiculous, which, Mark, you have that. And by the way, Iowa should have been the national champion in 1984, but I'll just leave that.
Of course they should have. They lost kidding. 4 games and tied 1. Of course they should have been.
Right. National championship. But yes, I want to acknowledge that I understand the people who don't agree with me, and that's okay. But for the record, it's not out of fear. It's not because I'm fearful of going after Fran. I'm not trying to go after anybody. I've been critical of Kirk, and I think Kirk is a wonderful human being. It's not about that. It's about what I see with the sport. And right now I'm happy with Iowa basketball. I'm disappointed in this last week, but you just move on. So anyways, yes, disappointing week 2 for football, because we got word Sunday that Iowa offensive lineman Cody Ince, and I see I thought there was a comment in here. I guess this was Fast Outdoor Food, said let's bash Petras. I'm not going to do that either, but Iowa offensive lineman Cody Ince is reportedly walking away from football, at least walking away from Iowa football, and that is incredibly disappointing, because Cody was probably Iowa's most versatile. I'm not saying he was always consistent. I thought he struggled last year, but he's had injury problems basically every year that he's been here. but he would have been, I believe, a 4th-year guy next year, Mark, or this year. That's a blow. And you and I both went through the offensive line, I believe, last week or the week prior, and he was projected to be a starter. So this is a big, big deal. And nobody's really talking about this. Now, the report was from Brian Ferentz. So Brian Ferentz, I guess, and I haven't heard the podcast, but Scott Docterman tweeted about it here, I believe, on Sunday. And I'll read the tweet word for word. Scott said, and I quote, Iowa O-lineman Cody Ince, who has battled numerous injuries the last 2 seasons, will step away from football, offensive coordinator Brian Ferentz said on the Iowa's in-house podcast. Ince, who completed his 4th season, has 10 career starts. Spring practice starts Wednesday. So that's all the information that Scott reported. I just haven't had time to go back and listen to that podcast. Shame on me, I guess, for that. But again, it's disappointing because that O-line is one of the weaker spots on the field. I know we're going to talk about the defensive line today, Mark, but that's just another gap and another spot to fill, and you're losing some serious experience. This same thing happened 2 years ago with Mark Kallenberger walking away. He had played a lot of right tackle during that 2020 campaign, and he just walked away. Now, part of that, I think, had to do with, my guess is it had to do with what happened with Seth Wallace and his brother, Jack Kallenberger. I'm not going to go into that. If people want to look that up, they can, but there was some allegations of abuse and verbal abuse, which was unfortunate. And so I would not be surprised if Mark, that went into his decision to leave. But it's just disappointing when these things happen because Kallenberger was playing well, and I thought Ince played well 2 years ago also. Nobody really played well besides Tyler Linderbaum, I don't think, along that offensive line last year. So they need to take a step forward. We'll see. Well, an opportunity for young guys. I like the personnel. I've talked about that. I like the young personnel, but somebody's got to step up.
It's somewhat surprising to me that this doesn't happen more often, because if you consider why football players play the sport outside of just the love for the game and that they were talented enough to make it through high school and receive a scholarship offer, of course, there are aspirations to play at the next level, to play in the NFL. And then there are also the benefits of receiving a degree, of course, in return for your skill at that level. But once you've achieved the education, if you don't feel that there's a viable option of going to the NFL, I can understand if you've been repeatedly injured and certainly kind of giving up on just that aspect of your life in favor of staying healthy and pursuing the rest of your education and moving on with another facet of your life.
Yeah, I'm not going to second guess it because I don't know his personal health. I know some of the injuries he's dealt with, but I guess, from a fan or somebody who doesn't know Cody personally, you're thinking, man, everybody's got, everybody deals with injuries, but you're an O-lineman. You're an Iowa O-lineman. Don't you think you're giving up a lot? But we don't know his situation. You're right. And best wishes to Cody. It's unfortunate. It wasn't presented, according to at least what I saw in Scott's tweet, it wasn't presented in a fashion that would make me think he's thinking of leaving. I mean, if he was going to transfer, you'd think he'd probably be there by now. You're not just going to sit out a spring and then all of a sudden try to transfer in the summer. So unfortunate. I feel terrible for him. These kids bust their butts throughout their entire lives to get to the point of being able to be not only a Big Ten guy, but just a Division I guy or just a scholarship guy at the collegiate level. So you just feel terrible for him. And, the good news is he'll if he hasn't already, he'll graduate and be able to start whatever career path he's on and hopefully live a very happy life. There's more to life to football, as you know, Mark. So best wishes to Cody. And Iowa, from a football perspective, is going to have to figure out how to fill that gap. Because remember, they've got Schott gone as well and Linderbaum gone. So you got 3 interior guys gone just like that. So it's going to be a challenge this spring, but that's why we got spring practice coming up.
Possibly missing out on the opportunity to play with Emory Jones.
Okay, before we get to that nonsense, I just got this, you can call it breaking news from the university. Literally, as we were talking, I just got an email from the University of Iowa. And some of this we had known about, had speculated about, but now it's been officially released from the university. So 2 players have changed positions for spring practice, one being Logan Jones, which is significant. I think maybe we talked about that, but Logan had talking about a guy who's dealt with injuries. He's dealt with a lot of injuries at that D tackle position. He is now being moved to, according to this, offensive line and center specifically. So he'll fill the need there at center. What I've been told is that Michael Myslinski has dealt with a lot of injury problems. He's kind of been the next in line at center. Matt Fagan, former walk-on, I would guess, or maybe current walk-on still. He is factored in there as well. He was the number 2 guy behind Linderbaum much of last year, perhaps all of last year. I'd have to look back. But Logan Jones moves to center. And then Mike Tim has moved from linebacker to fullback. So don't be surprised to see Mike Tim end up being Iowa's fullback down the road. Now, they got a good one right now in Potabom and Palisard behind him. But Mike Tim will move over to fullback. And then number changes. If this does, do you want to know the number changes, Mark? Is this going to excite you or anybody else on here?
I know it'll excite somebody. I guarantee. Okay. People love the uniform numbers.
All right. So Logan Jones moves to 68. He is now 68. Terry Roberts, I expect him to have a chance to start this year. He moves from 22. He's changed numbers twice, Mark. He used to be 16. Then he went to 22. He is now 2. So apparently Kirk has become very open and liberal with his thinking on numbers. He's letting guys just do whatever they want, I guess. Nolan Donald is now 22. So he moves to Terry Roberts' previous number. And then Jeremiah Pittman along that defensive line is now 55. And Kirk will meet with the media. This email stated that Kirk will meet with the media Wednesday. So that'd be tomorrow. And this is also breaking news, Mark. This is huge. This is absolutely huge. And I'm just seeing this. I'm literally seeing this as we're talking. The University of Iowa just confirmed Cody Ince is gone. They will no longer be active on the Iowa roster. Now, that's the language there. They will no longer be active on the Iowa roster. So is it possible that they were to return? I guess that's always possible, but no longer active on the Iowa roster, Cody Ince. And how about this one? Tight end Elijah Yelverton. That is a big deal. Elijah Yelverton behind. I mean, I know the one thing right now, and this might explain why Iowa went so hard after Steven Stilianos out of Lafayette. And maybe we should be more thankful that they were able to nab him from the transfer portal, Mark, because after Laporta and Luke Lachey, there ain't nobody with experience left. And Yelverton didn't have a lot of experience either, but at least he'd been in the program a couple of years. He's gone, according to this email. So now you're going to have Laporta, Lachey, and Stilianos, the only guys that have, I believe, the only guys that have taken snaps at the collegiate level. That's a big deal. And he's, Yelverton, I think I'd have to look back. I think Yelverton has dealt with some injuries as well, but he's also been buried on the depth chart. Even when Josiah Meeman was here, Meeman was ahead of him, and now you expect Stilianos to likely end up ahead of him as well. So that's big news. I feel bad for Yelverton and Ince. Don't know if Yelverton's is injury related. Wouldn't be surprised if it is. If they decide to go somewhere else, I wish him the best. Either way, I wish him the best. But that's significant breaking news on this Tuesday, Mark.
Hawkeyes Live for a 34th edition, folks, at 4:30 Central Time each and every Tuesday. We invite you to leave your comments and your questions for Corey and myself as we look at Iowa spring football, and we have marched through the offense. We will attack the defensive line today, so leave your comments and your questions once again, and head on over to the From the Hawkeye at the Storm right here on YouTube or on your favorite audio platform. And please support the channel in any way possible. Please like the video. Share these videos out on social media. You can share the link out there when we go live and bring some more folks in here, or just by word of mouth. Let them know every Tuesday where you talk Iowa football. One quick note, even though I'm a strict football guy on the Fran McCaffrey situation, and I speak out of ignorance. I speak out of ignorance, having not followed college basketball for roughly 10 years. I do think it's a difficult call to make, even from a fan standpoint. Let's say they like the coach, they see positives in the program. When there is so much emphasis placed in this particular sport of men's college basketball on the tournament versus a 30 to 35 game regular season and conference tournament, which the conference tournaments in college basketball take on different weights depending, again, on the situation of the program and the particular fan. Some of them, I always loved conference tournaments in college basketball and found them to be important. But in just reviewing his record, it appears as though the program's improved, and I believe based on something that you had stated, more so over the back half of his 12-year tenure than at the beginning. So in no way, based on the performance of this team this season, should he be fired. They just won a Big Ten tournament championship and earned a 5 seed in the NCAA tournament. But I could understand some grumblings when a coach, when for the entirety of his tenure, has 12 years at a school that's what would you rate it? Top 25 college basketball program, and he has yet to make it to a Sweet 16.
I get it. I get it. And I want him to get back there just as much as anybody else, but there's way too much emphasis placed on the NCAA tournament, in my opinion. It's just, look at the NBA, look at the NHL, look at the MLB. Nobody has this one and done format like college basketball. And I love it, but I also hate it because of this, because I mean, the guy just won the Big Ten tournament. Now, he hadn't won it. You can say, well, he hadn't won it before. Well, he's won it now. He's won it now. So does that mean nothing, Mark? Why do we even play in the Big Ten tournament? Why play in the conference tournament? I've had people say, well, they shouldn't play in the conference tournament because it actually hurts them. And I don't know the numbers has that, prove that or not. But and somebody else asked me, what confidence do you have? What reason for confidence do you have that he'll get to the Sweet 16? Well, I had no confidence in him in the conference tournament. He had never won more than one game in the conference tournament prior to this year. And Mark, he won 4 straight this year, and they won the title. So I just don't understand. People can call for whatever they want. I'm behind Fran. I'm supportive of Fran. Yes, I'm a homer. But I've had moments where I've been very critical of Fran McCaffery, specifically on the defensive end. But and I'm going to move on after today. I'm not going to discuss it anymore. But I saw your tweet and I wanted to address it. But I think it's ridiculous that people are even questioning that he would be, and he's not on the hot seat, Mark. He could miss listen to this. Here's a hot take for you. He could miss the tournament next year. Okay. He still would not be on the hot seat. He may be able to miss it twice in a row. Now, probably not. But I tell you, the athletic department, right or wrong, is going to give him a lot of leeway because of winning that Big Ten tournament, because of doing as well as he did this year. Nobody expected them to even make the tournament. And now we're complaining and groaning because he couldn't make the Sweet 16. They weren't even supposed to make the tournament, Mark. They lost Luka Garza, Joe Wieskamp, CJ Frederick, Jack Nungy, and they made the tournament. That's called good coaching. I don't care what anybody else has to say about it. That's called good coaching. And everybody has a right to their own opinion, but I don't get that one.
Okay. Anything else I say is going to take us just into a further discussion. And again, I am not qualified to weigh in on the matter other than just looking at the wins and losses and understanding college basketball from years gone by and having a reasonable idea, I believe, of what the expectations are at Iowa.
Let me just can we segue to football again? I included in this email was the official spring depth charts that were released. So a lot of breaking news, if you will, that's breaking at this hour, which is perfect timing, Mark. So you want me to run through the entire depth chart? I know we're
absolutely
line. So let's run through this depth chart. We can start on offense because I know we previewed much of the offense. The only position we have not previewed, you know what position that we've left off, Mark?
Linebackers, right?
No, on offense. On
offense, we did not touch, the quarterback position.
Quarterback position. So we're going to save that one probably for a couple of weeks from now. But here are the let me find it here. Yeah, this is fast. There's a lot of interesting information in this. And okay. Looking for a couple other details. So here are here is the spring depth chart on offense. Keegan Johnson listed as your first starter at wide receiver. Nico Reganey as your other starter, which is interesting, I guess. I mean, I don't know that it matters at this point, but we're talking about it. Keegan Johnson, Nico Reganey listed as your two number ones, and then Charlie Jones, Arlen Bruce listed behind Reganey. Jackson Ritter listed behind Johnson. I don't know if Jackson Ritter, if he's on scholarship now, but those are all guys that have played and played well. I think they're good at wide receiver. We've talked about that. Tight end, Sam Laporta 1, Luke Lachey 2. Obviously, there's no surprise there. I'd have to look, Mark, do they have anybody else, maybe besides walk-on? They don't have anybody else on scholarship there this spring, I don't think. Maybe Stylianos is there. I guess maybe I guess that would make sense that he would be enrolled in there already. But it's Laporta and Lachey there. At left tackle, you've got Mason Richmond. David Cobb is finally listed on the depth chart. That's going to make fans happy. He's listed as the backup left tackle. Justin Britt, your starting left guard. Bo Stevens backing him up. Tyler Ellsbury is listed as the starting center. Matt Fagan and Logan Jones listed behind Tyler. Connor Colby still listed at right guard. Interesting there, but we'll see how that works itself out in the coming practices. Josh Volk listed behind him at right guard. Jack Plum listed as your starting right tackle, who we've talked about him, Mark, and continued to say that he needs to take a big step forward. So he's your right tackle. Nick DeYoung, who struggled last year mightily, he's your backup right tackle. So nothing real earth-shattering there. We had speculated if maybe Connor Colby would be moved around, or maybe David Davidkov ends up at right tackle. Those things could still all happen. We haven't even started spring practice yet. And then at quarterback, there is no or on this depth chart. Okay, because Iowa likes to do. Kirk will do that sometimes, especially with running back. Like he likes to do the whole, make sure. Well, this guy's not number one. They're co-number ones. There's no or here. You want to guess who's number one on the depth chart at quarterback? Let's take a shot at it, Mark.
Mr. Spencer Petras.
You got it, brother. Spencer Petras is your number one quarterback. Alex Padilla as your number 2. Joey Labus, number 3. Running back, Gavin Williams, number 1. LaShawn Williams, number 2. Fullback is Monty Pottebaum, backed up by Turner Palisard. But both those guys seniors, I'm guessing I'd have to look at the eligibility. I think both those guys could come back for another year. But again, we talked about Mike Tim transitioning over to fullback. He is listed as the 3rd fullback here. Aaron Blom, the place kicker listed. Lucas, is it Amaya listed as the backup. And then they'll get, I think they've got a 3rd kicker whose name escapes me now coming in. That's going to bug me. But they've got the guy they just signed. I believe he's enrolling early, and I'm ashamed to not be able to think of who that guy is. So that's your offensive starters and backups. On defense, at defensive end, you got John Wagner on the left, Max Llewellyn behind him, Noah Shannon as your left tackle, Lucas Van Ness, who played well last year, he's your backup. Logan Lee at right tackle, Y.A. Black as the backup, Joe Evans is the starting right end, Deontay Craig there. So no surprises along that defensive line, which we're going to talk more extensively about here in a second, Mark. Your cash guy / Leo linebacker, Sebastian Castro listed as the cash, and then Justin Jacobs as your Leo guy. So that's a bit surprising. We kind of speculated that perhaps that would end up being Wampa, and maybe it will in the long run, or maybe somebody else ends up working in there. But right now it's Sebastian Castro. You can kind of see they like those converted safeties. We haven't seen a lot of cornerback being used at that kind of hybrid position. I think we saw DJ Johnson. I think he ran briefly at the cash spot before he transferred to Purdue a few years back. But the point is Sebastian Castro, who is a natural safety, listed there, and then Logan Klemp, the backup linebacker at that position. Middle linebacker, you've got Jack Campbell, Jay Higgins backing him up. Excuse me, I can't talk. Weak side linebacker, you've got Seth Benson, Kyler Fisher. Left corner, Jamari Harris, Cooper DeJean. That's a surprise to me. Cooper, he's a guy who I thought was playing a bit out of position late in the year last year, Mark. I thought he was more of a safety. Now maybe they see him differently. Maybe they think they got a lot of depth at safety with Wampa coming in, and we'll see. I think TJ Hall is probably going to be a corner as well. But right now, you've got Cooper at corner as the backup on the left side. And then at the right corner position, you've got Riley Moss being backed up by Terry Roberts. So I'm rooting for Terry Roberts. No offense to Jamari Harris, but Terry Roberts is the older guy. He has paid his dues. I'm rooting for him to win a starting role. Riley Moss is going to be a starter, barring some injury. Strong safety, you got Kayvon Merriweather being backed up by Sebastian Castro, who will also be in there at cash. Free safety, Quinn Schulte is your starter. Jackson Rexroth backing him up. Again, if my memory is not failing me, Wampa is there, isn't he? Man, my mind is really failing me, Mark. I didn't expect to talk about all these other positions today. I think Wampa enrolled early. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. I should know that. But again, this is all going to be worked out over the coming weeks. Punter, you got Torrey Taylor, Nick Phelps as his backup. Punt return, you of course got Charlie Jones. Kick return, Charlie Jones. Gavin Williams backing him up. Long snapping, Luke Elkin, and then Liam Reardon backing him up. So, off the top of my head, I'm trying to think what surprises me in there. And
yeah, I was just going to say, to pull all that together, what do you call significant between the offensive and the defensive depth charts?
I think the Sebastian Castro playing cash is significant. I mean, we see Dane Belton. I've heard some comparisons. Iowa had its pro day yesterday, and you hear some comparisons from people that he kind of reminds some people in the league of Amani Hooker, who's certainly carving out a niche with the Titans. So obviously that's probably good news if you're Sebastian Castro, because that's been a pretty solid pathway to the next level. So that was an intriguing one. I'm not surprised that Xavier Wampa's nowhere on here, and I wouldn't panic if I'm people who want to see him. I still think he's going to play, and I mean, he hasn't practiced. So what are they, I don't think, can you imagine if you're an older guy and you get supplanted on the depth chart, the pre-spring depth chart by a guy who's never seen the field here? So I don't think that means really much of anything. Yeah.
Wampa's listed here, by the way, as an early enrollee, one of the 4 early enrollees.
Right. Okay, I got that right, and that's what I was thinking. Ellsbury is, like I said, starter at center. I guess that doesn't surprise me if what we've heard about Myslinski is true, that he's out with an injury. I'm assuming that's what it is, because Myslinski's nowhere on this depth chart. And I guess I'm maybe a tad surprised Regani's listed as your number 1 receiver. But I'm guessing it doesn't really matter. Like, all these guys play, obviously as the season, look at what happened with Tyrone Tracy last year. Everybody expected him to be one of the best wide receivers in the league. And by the time he got to season's end, he hardly played. I would say those are the main things that stand out. Just kind of re-scrolling through this. Again, the Cooper, DeJean or Dejan, I don't know if people pronounce it differently. Him being listed at corner is a bit surprising to me. Jackson Rexroth is a guy that I didn't expect to see on the depth on the 2 deep, but not a lot of surprises there. I hope Terry Roberts ends up being a starter. That's what I would say. But I'm just glad we got this information to break to everybody while we were on the air, Mark. And do you want to start in on the defensive line? I mean, since we have the spring depth chart now, and we were going to talk about it, you want to start right in on that?
Yeah, and before we get to the particulars, which you will be able to certainly run down much more capably than I tend to give the national perspective or the Big Ten perspective of Iowa football as we delve into these various storylines, whether they be breakdown particular positions or breaking news. And for Iowa across the defensive line, it's a stout group, or that's the typical reputation and performance and productivity of Iowa's defensive line. And I guess AJ Epinesa is kind of the poster child for a number of guys that I could name, and you could probably tack on a few more in recent memory that have just been longer, leaner, athletic guys on the edge who have been just a pain in the rear of quarterbacks, in addition to just doing what edge rushers do, but in terms of getting in their sight, batting passes, and just being a disruption from that standpoint as well. So Iowa, with a tremendous reputation across the Big Ten and nationally for producing both productivity across the defensive line at this level, but also moving those players on to the NFL at a pretty rapid rate. And again, we'll remind people that don't follow Iowa football on a regular basis. And we've got a number of people, and this is kind of a different type show in that way, that it's an Iowa-based show, but we've got college fan bases represented all across the board. People would be surprised. This school is currently 6th in the nation in players on NFL rosters for the 2021 season. So keep that in mind. It's, that I know you probably get sick of it, Corey, and I would as well if I were you and other Iowa people, because there's a narrative out there, and it's partially true, but the partial portion of that is very minute, and that's that this program just kind of makes something out of nothing and doesn't have talent, doesn't recruit well, and they just kind of put together really good football teams based on, guys bulking up in the cornfield and baling hay and being able to, just kind of figure it out. Yeah,
I know. I absolutely know what you mean, and that's the thing. Like, that's why you can't draw very many conclusions based upon these early depth charts, because, Iowa, you knock him if you want, knock Kirk Ferentz if you want. He is all about hard work and the grind, and you got problems, we're just going to work it out. So, you're going to have a situation, I'm sure, where talent is going to trump experience, and that's okay. I mean, that's what you want. You want talented guys doing that. And, one thing that has always stood out about my conversations with Don Patterson, and he always says this to me, even in private, if you have a close battle between a young guy and an old guy, and it's just neck and neck, and it's hard to make a call, you know what the deciding factor should be most of the time? It's going to be age. If it's so close it's hard to call, you'd prefer to go with the younger guy, because you would assume that he has more upside, more room for growth. Whether you think that's unfair or not, that's just the fact. Now, I can't speak for Kirk Ferentz if he operates that way, but my point is, I'm with Wampa there. We're going to be able to see. I know there's a spring practice planned. I believe it's April 23rd. Is it that late? Let me just see here if I can find that information as well, Mark. But we're going to be able to see what happens with Xavier Wampa this spring, and if he's what he has been hyped up to be, and I think he is. I wouldn't be surprised if we see him as a starter this fall. I've said that several times before, and even a guy or two who, they're not here right now. Specifically, Aaron Graves would be another one that I've talked very highly about him, and I know that goes into our defensive line conversation. I think he's going to play right away. Now, I don't think he's going to be a starter. AJ Epinesa wasn't even a starter his first year here, but AJ Epinesa did play and created some havoc, and I think Graves he's right there. He doesn't seem to have the wingspan that Epinesa has, and that might hurt him a bit. But I think they're going to run him inside and out, and he's got a really good physique. He's got great strength. He's got good speed for his size, and he's I don't know. He's a guy that intrigues me, and I did just pull that up. So for anybody that wants to know the spring schedule, you got a press conference with Kirk tomorrow. We know that spring practice starts tomorrow. Tuesday, then they'll have player interviews on the 29th, on the 5th of April, 12th of April. And then we'll have more player interviews on the 23rd of April. That's after the spring practice, which I believe is open to the public. I'm just seeing here. Yes, it will be a public event inside Kinnick Stadium. So no trip over to West Des Moines. They haven't done that in a few years. So you will get an open spring practice on Saturday, April 23rd at 9:45 a.m. Be followed by some post-practice player interviews, and head coach Kirk Ferentz will meet with the media as well. You'll hear from George Barnett, Liddell Betts throughout the different availabilities, Raymond Braithwaite, Jay Neiman, Seth Wallace, Kelvin Bell. I'm just trying to see if Abdul Hodge will speak to the media on March 30th. So, of course, he's new to the staff. And so, yeah, lots of information coming. We haven't had this kind of information in a long time to talk about, Mark. So this is exciting.
All right, folks. this is the best time of year for you guys to produce the show. So leave your comments and your questions, and we will, in the meanwhile, run through the defensive front. And do you want me to size up the players and then you can take
Sure.
it from there? Or
Absolutely.
so I should be giving credit to whatever source I used. I have in the past, but I don't recall who I used that gave an Iowa depth chart projection, which we don't need the projection anymore. But here's some of the players that we can highlight, and then you can take it from there. So first and foremost, we've got Logan Lee, 48 tackles, 5 tackles for loss, and 3 sacks in 2021.
And Logan, I thought, really came along as the season went on. He's a big guy. I mean, he probably is going to gain some weight during this offseason. He's 6'5", 270. He's listed as 277, but I don't think that's been updated. He'll get another summer to get his weight up a bit more. I think ideally they'd probably like him closer to 290 would be just a guess. But we've seen, I mean, Matt Nelson, who's now playing tackle, offensive tackle for the Lions, he ran pretty thin at like 6'7", 6'8". So they don't mind running with some more slender guys in there. They've got Noah Shannon, who will get a lot of snaps there. But Logan Lee really, I thought, developed as a pass rusher last year. Noah Shannon's kind of your prototypical run stopper. He's a big body, not as tall, obviously, but he's a guy who's probably going to fill some gaps this year. And he seems to have improved each year. He's not been, dynamic in pass rushing, but they don't really need him to be if they can develop guys like Lucas Van Ness and certainly Joe Evans he's kind of a pass rush specialist, but Lucas Van Ness had a really good year as a freshman. You see the numbers there, 33 tackles, 8.5 tackles for loss with 7 sacks. Those are pretty good numbers for a team that they run. Iowa likes to run 6 to 8 guys at those positions. I think Jones, he missed some time last year. Deontay Craig missed some time last year, but most of these guys stayed healthy. And Zach Van Valkenburg, he was a mainstay at that one of the 2 defensive end positions. So I think Lucas Van Ness, I know he's not listed as a starter. Let me go back to the depth chart here. Right now, according to the spring depth chart, Lucas Van Ness is listed as the backup behind Noah Shannon at tackle. So you've got him listed here as defensive end, but they'll run him both ways, Mark. And that's the beauty. And you look at, if someone wants to take a peek at the Iowa football roster, I find it intriguing. There are 3 guys listed on the Iowa roster who are listed specifically as defensive ends. And one of those, I look at one of them is Brennan Sweeney, who I believe was a walk-on when he got here, and I think he still is. And the same can be said for Anu Doken. I think I'm pronouncing his name right as well. He's a local kid from Iowa City. The only guy who's a scholarship player who's listed as a defensive end is Joe Evans. Everyone else is a DL, a defensive lineman. So they're going to run them both ways. Aaron Graves is a perfect example of that. Even AJ Epinesa, he was running inside, he was running out. Iowa likes to run stunts, and they were successful with those stunts last year. If they didn't have good stunt action last year, we wouldn't have seen those 7 sacks or really any sacks, because Iowa did have problems in man-to-man situations at those defensive end spots. So I like Lucas Van Ness a lot. I think he gives him good length, good athleticism, and he just kind of has a knack for it. It reminds me a little bit of maybe a slightly smaller Anthony Nelson, who's carved out a nice role in the NFL as well.
Yeah, that was the Daily Iowan projecting that even though Van Ness was used as a defensive tackle last year, that they projected him as more of an end. Now we see the spring depth chart come out with him at tackle. All right. And then you touched upon John Wagner as well.
Yeah, John Wagner is listed as your starter at left end, and he's kind of the guy that we've been waiting for. I mean, kind of like Cody Ince was, and now, of course, Cody Ince, maybe compare him to Justin Britt on the offensive line. Guys who seem to have the physical traits. Wagner listed at 6'5", 266. He's a big guy out of Dowling, but he's a senior. I mean, it's now or never for a guy like John Wagner, and he's another guy who's dealt with injuries, Mark. So can he stay healthy? Hopefully he has a healthy spring practice. These guys, you just hate to see guys miss an entire spring practice. It's such a blow to development. And he's a guy who's got a lot of upside. I could say the same thing about Deontay Craig, who we haven't talked about. Slightly smaller. Let me look at his height and weight. He's listed, actually, I could look at the depth chart. He's listed at 6'3", 263. But again, seemed to be one of the more aggressive, gritty guys on the outside for Iowa when he was healthy. I know he missed some time last year, so his development will be important. A couple of guys we haven't brought up: Chris Reems, Louis Steck. I think both of those guys were. I think Chris Reems is walk on. Both of those guys played last year and are big bodies. Chris Reems listed at 6'7", 270. Mark. Trying to think. Louis Steck. I think he was listed. He might have even been a little bit heavier. I think he's about 6'4", 264. I want to say he was closer to 6'2", maybe 6'1", somewhere in there. But they're not afraid to play guys who are walk-ons, who have been in the program for a couple of years. As long as they can get 7 to 8 guys they're comfortable with running, that seems to be what Kelvin Bell wants to do. And that I've been very complimentary of Kelvin Bell, because I'm not knowledgeable enough to break down, where he ranks in the Big Ten as far as the defensive line coach position, but he has found a way to develop enough guys each year to have 6 to 8 guys. I don't remember the last time they didn't have 6 to 8 guys they'd run, and they're not going to run them if they're not comfortable. But it seemed like even years prior, even under Norm Parker, there were times where I would only run maybe 6 guys, 5 or 6 guys, and you have these little, like Dan Persa, run you all over the field and guys get wore out. That's not happening now. Fatigue does not seem to be a problem with Iowa's defensive line because they have enough bodies back there. So that's another reason why I think Aaron Graves is probably going to play. Brian Allen Jr. is another guy who is a 4-star by some websites, who's going to be coming in here as well. Maybe he'll work his way into the depth chart. He's a bit undersized, but obviously recruiting rankings like him. Haven't seen as much tape of him as have of Graves, but as long as they can get 7 to 8 guys, I think you can probably feel pretty good about Phil Parker's D-line again.
Iowa Hawkeyes live every Tuesday, 4:30 Central Time, 5:30 Eastern. Please make it a habit and bring some folks in here with you. In the meantime, get on over to From the Hawkeye of the Storm right here on YouTube, or if you want to listen, then join Corey on From the Hawkeye of the Storm on your favorite audio platform. So Iowa signed 3 defensive linemen in the 2022 class. Interestingly enough, the expected star of the group, Aaron Graves, is the guy that will not be on campus until summer camp. 18th rated defensive lineman in the country, or defensive end, I should say, in the country, a top 125 player, regardless of position, according to 247 Sports. Now, the 2 guys that are going to get the jump on him, even though they aren't as highly touted, would be Kaden Crawford and Brian Allen, 70th and 82nd rated up front. But
I don't
they
mean
are
to
on campus.
I didn't mean to leave Kaden Crawford out. And yeah, Brian Jones is there. Kaden Crawford's been working hard. We had him on my podcast here a couple of months ago. He's kind of your typical Iowa kid, just a hard worker. And but here's the thing about Aaron Graves. The only reason Aaron Graves isn't there early is because he wants to be done with 2 years of college before he gets to. Now think about that for a minute. 2 years of college. I would guess that he's way into the fray. But you're right. Getting there early has proven to be somewhat consequential. We saw that with Connor Colby last year. Perfect example of a kid who got there early, and I think it benefited him. TJ Hall is another guy at defensive back. Of course, we haven't previewed the defensive backs yet, but he's there early, and will have an opportunity to shine. So. And I think I might be missing Landon Van Keekerix. We haven't talked about him. He's another guy who I don't believe is enrolling early, but is another guy they brought in during this class, and they brought him in I think he was like the last guy they signed back in December. You never know. Like these guys find a way to make a name for themselves when you would least expect it. sometimes the greatest stories are guys you've never heard of, Mark, and spring balls when they emerge, oftentimes. So, some of them aren't here yet. I get that. But Crawford, I appreciate you bringing him up, and I'm ashamed that I missed him. We did interview him a couple months ago. They got I think they got good personnel, the defensive line. I remember we published a story, a friend who writes for my website here in Story County. Once in a while, we'll do a feature article on a position or something, especially preseason, and we may do that again this year. But remember, he wrote a column last year about, just not worrying about the defense. You just don't worry about it here. And I can say that every year. Like, these are going to be I'm going to enjoy doing these shows over the coming weeks, Mark, but I'm just not going to be concerned. I just don't care, because you just know that they're going to find a way to develop depth there. Now, injuries can derail you, but again, when you have depth, it solves a lot of those problems.
All right, folks, appreciate you being here. And we're going to go a little shorter this week than we typically do. Now, Erica joined us just a few minutes ago. Maybe she joined us for the entire show, but she just made her presence known, and she just laid down the sledgehammer, pinning the bowl game loss against Kentucky on one guy.
Who is that one guy? I'm assuming that's Kirk Ferentz.
Oh, if she's, I wasn't thinking that.
I know
that much
thinking.
from a program landscape. I was thinking on the field. I thought she was pointing to the guy that throws the ball.
Yeah, I know. I know what she's thinking. I'm not trying to. I'm not going to put it all on Spencer Petras, because again, he's not being taught well enough. If he's not, I mean, something's going wrong, right? It's either evaluating talent and recruiting, it's developing guys, or then evaluating during practice. I've talked about that at length. So,
Corey, how much time do you have?
I got another few minutes.
Okay, 2 or 3 minutes,
sure.
Because I think we should hit on, even though it's most likely, and when I say most likely, I know 99% certainty that it's not going to materialize into anything. Discuss another veteran quarterback with extensive experience against top competition, Emory Jones of Florida, who is now in the transfer portal and could be a welcome addition, who I would not believe to be a slam dunk starter, but I would give him the lean over Spencer Petras in a quarterback battle.
So why don't you think he's a slam dunk starter when his numbers are much? I'm not saying he is, but I'm just saying, is it based upon the difference in skill, talent at those crucial positions at Florida? Is that why you would evaluate his stats differently than you would evaluate Petras's or Padilla's?
Well, I know that this doesn't speak specifically to interception rate, but he's a little more careless with the football. So we threw 13 picks last year. I don't know how that compares to Petras's 9, something in that range.
13. Let me just pull up his stats here, so I'm not speaking in ignorance. Spencer Petras last year threw 9 picks to 10 interceptions. Of course, as you know, Emory Jones threw 9 picks and interceptions are the same thing. 9 picks to 10 touchdowns. Emory Jones had 19 touchdowns to 13 picks.
I think you're slightly safer with Spencer Petras, slightly safer, but have a lot more upside with Emory Jones, and not just upside in regards to proven production on the field as a runner, in addition to a guy who I'm going to say, and I'm not going to claim to be an expert on Emory Jones versus Spencer Petras and comparing their skill sets, because I don't want both of them throw every pass for the entire season, but I've seen both of them play probably 15 times. And I'll say that they have very similar passing skill sets. Like, nobody's a decided better passer than the other.
And let's remember this. Emory Jones had 787 yards from scrimmage on the ground. So if there's a tie break, even if you want, and I would still argue, without watching nearly as much of Emory Jones as you did, I would still argue that his passing numbers are far and away better. I mean, just QBR for one thing. Petras in 2020, his QBR was 119. In 2021, it was 117. Emory Jones, his QBR last year was 142. So I'm going to give him the edge there. But even if you want to argue that it's close, boy, those 800 yards from scrimmage on the
That's
ground,
decided. That's part of the position now as
right?
well.
And
That is
should
part of
be.
production.
It's not at Iowa, Mark. It's not at Iowa. It's
It
not at
could
Iowa.
be.
Well, being a mobile quarterback is not part of the position at Iowa. Mobility is not part of the criteria because Iowa's had Nate Stanley, Spencer Petras, and Alex Padilla. Love him if you don't like, and I like Alex Padilla. He seems to be a gamer. He's more mobile than Spencer, but he's not Emory Jones. He's not Taylor Taylor Martinez is a good example too. Adrian Martinez or any other mobile guys. I'm not saying you have to have a mobile guy, but you better have a darn good passer. You better have a Kaden Slovis or a Kenny Pickett that can really throw darts. And I hope they get that. I hope they get there. But the Emory Jones thing, like I know it's not going to happen. Unfortunately, I know that, and I just don't think. I wonder if Kirk even knows that Emory Jones is in the portal. Do you think he knows, Mark? Do you think anybody's told him? Because he's not on Twitter. Kirk isn't.
I hope somebody is at least informed Kirk that Emory Jones is available. A fringe 5-star coming out of high school.
Well, but Mark, if Kirk, let me ask you this. So Kirk's not on social media, and if Kirk is, and I'm not saying he has, I'm just guessing what happened behind closed doors. If Kirk has made it clear we're not going after a quarterback in the portal, because I mean, like, who do you like? Okay, what's he going to say? We'll go after a quarterback in the portal, but he's got to be. I mean, what's the standard, Mark? Because there have been some really good quarterbacks that have come and gone in this portal, and none of them have been recruited by Iowa, to my knowledge. Bo Nix, Keaton Slovis, Adrian Martinez, I'd throw in there. Zach Calzada, you go down the list. The kid from LSU, they haven't recruited any of them. So I guess my question is, if he has just said, maybe he's made that clear to Tyler Barnes, his son-in-law, we're not going after a quarterback in the portal, then Mark, wouldn't you think he probably wouldn't know? Because why would anybody tell him if they know where he stands on it?
True.
I just think it's sad. I just think it's unfortunate. I think it's to a degree it's cheating the people that some of the receivers that are there that deserve to. They deserve better. That's all I'll say. And it's not better than Spencer Petras. I think they deserve some better decision making for who's throwing them the football. And maybe we're going to get that with Brian Ferentz. It seems to me that Ken O'Keefe has been made to look like the scapegoat in all this, because the passing game was a disaster. It has been a disaster. And Ken O'Keefe walks away, and we just promote Brian Ferentz, who was already the offensive coordinator. We just promote him to QB's coach as well. So I guess my question is, I mean, does that mean that Ken O'Keefe was the problem? At least that's how Iowa, from my perspective, it seems that Ken O'Keefe is being painted that way. And I don't know if that's right or wrong. I think Kenton's a terrific person. I've been critical of him as well. But is he the biggest problem? Is he the problem? I guess that's we'll find out this fall.
It would be fascinating to see a quarterback battle. I would enjoy that. And
he says it's an open race, Mark. He said that back in January, that it's an open race. So
with another quarterback coming into play. And I'm glad you brought up the QBR statistic, because I do think that that's more valuable, more accurate than the quarterback rating.
Yeah, and it's not really close. So, it is what it is.
Okay.
Maybe Joey Labus will be the guy that nobody's seen. Maybe he'll just take off this spring, Mark. Maybe it'll happen. But and I'm sure, going back to Cole, who says I care too much about what people say about me, I hope that's not true. The truth is, I really do value. I've talked about this, Mark. I really pride myself and my channel, on being interactive with people and having back and forth. So that's why if I address it too much, that's why, because I want to have that back and forth. But I'm sure I'm going to get ripped, because there are some people who are so darn supportive of Spencer Petras, Mark, of Kirk Ferentz, of Brian Ferentz, and they will go to the grave with their opinion that this is going to work. I mean, there are people out there, and I've seen it on social media. Thank you so much for making your son the quarterback's coach, Kirk. Thank you. I'm like, okay, I mean, maybe it works. Maybe you can be supportive, but this is almost like a little weird. Like, why are you that attached to the idea? But I just think some people, and I appreciate what Kirk's given to the program, but I think sometimes it gets a little bit out of balance. Everybody has a right to their own opinion, but I think it gets a little bit out of balance, and we're not seeing the forest through the trees. That's a great. I don't ever use that phrase, Mark. It just came out. It's just the forest through the trees. It just was just a perfect opportunity to use it, and I was able to.
It just flowed.
Man, it worked.
Beautiful.
It's been a good show, Mark. I appreciate you jumping on as always.
Well, this has been your show. This is your show, especially in the off season. I think it's pretty evident. We unleash you, let you talk Iowa football, and I just fill in the blanks here and there. But you are the guy that you're the reason we've got this channel.
Well, I think you have something to do with that as well, Mark. I just want to tell everybody before we go off the air, I'm having a surgery tomorrow. And yes, I know I had another surgery several months back. It's a further surgery. It's not unexpected or anything like that. But I know there's a lot of Iowa news. I'm going to try to get as much done production-wise. But if I'm MIA for a couple of days, understand why. So just wanted to let everybody know that. And we'll be back next Tuesday on this channel, Mark. And we'll cut up this show as well and make it a little bit easier for people to watch.
Well, certainly all of our best to you over the next day in particular. And thank you for the super chat, Erica. We appreciate that. Mark, do you have an Iowa helmet? I do not. And somebody had pointed out that this is a new edition, just arrived today. So that might spur on some Iowa fans to
GBR. Hey, Erica, send him a helmet. Send him a little helmet, and he'll put it up, right, Mark? You'll put it up.
Oh, of course I will.
So send it to Mark, Erica.
Erica, the next show, I will find the banner and pull up the address that you can send a helmet, you or whomever else. So whomever gets a bit perturbed that their team is not represented on the shelf, understand that the last, I don't know how many of these helmets, at least 15, were sent to me.
Hold on a second. The real Hayden says he sent you one, Mark. The real Hayden says I sent him one. I kind of forgot about it. I don't know if he got it. He said he sent you one, Mark. You never got it.
I stopped down at the local Staples today where they are sent.
Find that tracking number, Hayden. Find that tracking number.
Yes, please do.
Call the Postal Service.
Please do. But Erica, thank you so much for the contribution. We appreciate that. So everybody head on back next Tuesday at 4:30 Central. We will talk more Iowa football, break down another position. Who knows what else will come out of spring practice by then. All right, Corey, we appreciate it. All of our best with your procedure tomorrow.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate the time. We'll talk to you soon.